On January 26, 2021, a woman in San Antonio contacted 911, expressing concern over not hearing from her stepson, Martell DeRouen, for 4 days. Police officers arrived at his apartment for a welfare check. When police arrived, they found Martel's vehicle parked in the building's garage, leading them to believe he was likely at home. As police approached the door, they spotted a suspicious hole near the peephole. This small hole was unmistakable. It had been made from a bullet. A maintenance team was eventually called to force open the apartment door, which had been locked and deadbolted from the inside. Officers were able to gain entry to the unit. Just inside the doorway, they discovered the victim, 34-year-old Martell DeRouin's body lying in a pool of blood. The victim had sustained a single gunshot to the head. As the investigation unfolded, police uncovered crucial evidence, including a 911 call and footage from a doorbell camera. Hello everyone, I am George, and welcome to Town Hill Crimes. Today's case starts off as a strange one, with puzzling details that slowly come together. Throughout the investigation, a wealth of evidence has emerged, but how it's been interpreted varies greatly. In the end, this case hinges on who you believe is telling the truth. Let's take a closer look. When the police arrived at the Towers complex off La Cantera Parkway, where Martel DeRouen lived alone in a new one-bedroom unit, they noticed that inside the apartment there were clear signs of a struggle. Broken dishes and glasses were scattered across the floor. In the closet, officers found an empty gun box, but the firearm was missing. Women's clothing and shoes were also found throughout the apartment. On the bed, they discovered a broken acrylic fingernail, adding to the evidence of a violent confrontation. As news of Martel's death spread among family and friends, the shock and grief felt by the DeRouen family was overwhelming. Many struggled to process the murder, believing there must have been some kind of mistake. Martel wasn't the type of man to have enemies. He was smart, capable, and successful. A military veteran, Martel had served 6 years in the Air Force, rising to the rank of decorated sergeant. His role in Air Force intelligence involved handling some of the military's most sensitive and confidential information. After leaving the military, Martel pursued a career in music as a rapper under the stage name Cardone. He had recently signed with The Orchard, a Sony-affiliated music label. Active in the San Antonio music scene, he often worked as a sound engineer, helping record music for other up-and-coming artists out of his own studio. Friends and colleagues saw Martel as a rare figure, a successful rapper who remained humble. He was also the cousin of Beyoncé through his grandmother Agnes Darren. However, despite years of striving to make it big in the music industry, Martel never name-dropped, nor did he mention his famous connection to most people. Martel met his future wife Joya when they were teenagers. After reconnecting post-high school, the two eventually married. By the time of his death, they had been formally separated for about 2 years, living in separate apartments just a few miles apart while renting out the house they had once owned together. Despite the separation, they stayed on good terms and spent time together every week. On the morning Martel was found, Joya had driven to his apartment at the Tower. After speaking with his parents and receiving no response to her calls, texts, and emails, she decided to check on him in person. The last time anyone had spoken to Martel was on January 22nd, 4 days earlier. Sadly, the medical examination confirmed this timeline. Martel had been shot through his door 3 days before he was discovered. As police searched deeper into the apartment, they began piecing together the details of Martel's final moments. As police moved further into the apartment, they began piecing together the events of Martel's last night. The kitchen floor was covered in broken dishes, shattered into pieces. In the bedroom, the sheets had been torn off the mattress and twisted into a pile. Next to them lay a durag and a broken acrylic nail. One possibly pulled off the head and the other snapped from a finger during a struggle. Signs of a violent altercation were visible throughout the room. The bed frame had come apart, and the headboard was torn from the rest of it. A basket, seemingly knocked to the floor, contained a cartridge with bullets, but no gun. In the closet, officers found a pistol case, the one that came from the manufacturer, but the pistol was missing. A neighbor living directly below Martel's apartment reported hearing a loud, violent argument on the night of the 22nd. She even recorded a short video of her ceiling, capturing the sounds of yelling and objects breaking. The noise was so intense that it permeated through the floor and into her apartment. However, this neighbor did not contact the police. Instead, someone else made a call. Upon reviewing emergency calls from the night of Martel's death, investigators found a call from a woman at the Tower Apartments who was locked out of her unit and concerned about a hole in the door. By the time officers arrived, the woman was long gone. However, during the call, she provided a name, Joya DeRouen, Martel's estranged wife. When asked to give and spell her name, the caller identified herself as Joya DeRouen. The catch? She misspelled both the first and last name. On the night of the shooting, a new resident, Caroline, was in her apartment across the hallway from Martel's. She was waiting for her DoorDash delivery when she heard what she thought was knocking at her door. Mistaking it for her food, she opened the door, but instead of her delivery, she saw a woman in her 20s, wearing a long green sundress, banging on the door of the unit across the hall. Later, police asked Caroline to take a look at the group of onlookers gathered outside the building, where Martel's wife, Joya, stood in shock, awaiting information. When asked if Joya was the woman she had seen banging on the door that night, Caroline said no. Joya was definitely not the woman she had seen. Caroline's account was later confirmed by a critical piece of evidence, a Ring doorbell camera from a nearby apartment. The footage, captured around 9 p.m. on January 22nd, showed a young woman, barefoot and dressed in a green sundress, holding a cell phone in one hand and a pistol in the other. Beyond the damage inside Martel's apartment, investigators now had clear indications of a second person, the mysterious woman who had been with Martel the night he was murdered. By the window in Martel's apartment stood an easel with a partially completed painting left abandoned. In front of it was a pair of women's shoes, surrounded by painting supplies. 2 glasses of Hennessy, a type of brandy, sat out, both left unfinished. Nearby, a large purse rested on a chair next to the broken bed, while an iPad lay on a footstool. Finally, investigators found 2 debit cards, both bearing the same name, Sasha Skare. Sasha Skare, 21 years old, was an aspiring songwriter and vocalist. She lived mainly in Austin with her mother and freelanced as a graphic designer, creating corporate logos and flyers. According to Joya, Martel had met Sasha at a music video shoot back in 2016, when Sasha, then 17, was modeling and trying to launch her own music career. Martel had offered to help her. Years later, after his separation from Joya, Martel and Sasha became romantically involved. However, after his death, Sasha was nowhere to be found. Sasha Skare's photo quickly circulated in the media, with friends posting on her Instagram, urging her to turn herself in. This wasn't her first run-in with law enforcement. In December 2019, Austin police responded to a shooting on North Lamar Boulevard just after 1 a.m. When they arrived, they found Sasha, then 20 years old, who said she and her boyfriend had gone to meet someone to buy marijuana. Her boyfriend, Andrew Bass, had been shot in the chest, and medics found him unresponsive in the back seat of a car. Despite CPR efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Sasha told police that Andrew had walked off to make the deal while she waited in the car. She claimed she heard gunshots and ran to find Andrew wrestling with another man holding a gun. However, investigators later discovered messages on Andrew's phone showing that Sasha had arranged the meeting with the intent to rob the man. During the attempted robbery, Andrew was killed and the other man was seriously injured. Sasha fled with the gun and was charged with aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, though she was released on bond. In March 2020, Sasha was severely burned in a propane tank explosion at a residential building. The accident left scars on her face, which had healed by winter 2021. Then, in February, after news of Martell DeRouin's murder spread, Sasha turned herself in to San Antonio police. 2 years later, Sasha stood trial for first-degree murder. The prosecution argued that after an argument with Martel in his apartment, Sasha left with his gun. She later returned, angry, as seen in the doorbell footage, carrying the weapon. They contended that Sasha fired a shot through the door, targeting a spot where she knew Martel was standing, as evidenced by the bullet hole near the peephole. The state further argued that after realizing she had hit Martel, Sasha made a 911 call, pretending to be his wife, Joya, in an attempt to conceal her identity. Joya testified in court, recognizing Sasha's voice on the 911 recording and pointing out inconsistencies in the call. For instance, Sasha gave an incorrect address, mistakenly referencing the street where she used to live, and provided an inaccurate phone number, unaware that 911 could trace the real number used. In her defense, Sasha's legal team claimed she had been frightened by the earlier altercation with Martel. They argued that when she returned to the apartment, she only intended to collect her belongings, her shoes, purse, and bank cards, which were inside. According to the defense, Sasha banged on the door holding the gun for her own protection. The defense withheld their opening statement until the prosecution had finished presenting its case. They called a single witness to explain what they claimed had transpired that night, leading to Martel's death. Since Sasha didn't drive, Martel would pick her up from her mother's house in Austin 2 to 3 times a week, taking her to his apartment in San Antonio. This is what happened on January 22nd. At the apartment, Sasha started painting a piece meant to promote Martel's upcoming performance. He was working on his music nearby. Later, they had dinner and watched a movie together. During the evening, Sasha received a FaceTime call from a photographer she was hoping to work with to further her career. Martel, sitting within earshot, became upset, accusing Sasha of talking to another man. Sasha claimed this led to a heated argument where Martel's jealousy took over. The argument turned physical, with Sasha saying she eventually ran from the apartment, barefoot, holding her phone and a gun. In court, Sasha explained how things escalated. She banged on Martel's apartment door, trying to get his attention. When the gun went off, her explanation about how it fired didn't convince the jury. The prosecution didn't dispute that there was a physical altercation that night, nor that Sasha was injured. But they argued that her actions after the shooting suggested she wasn't in fear for her life, as she claimed. For example, instead of asking for help from neighbors, she borrowed a phone charger. She did call 911, but, according to the prosecution, it was because she knew the bullet had hit Martel. The state also questioned why Sasha went back to the apartment with the gun if she was truly scared. Sasha told the jury that after leaving the building, she threw the gun in a dumpster because she didn't want to keep carrying it. 2 days later, she took photos of her injuries, including a black eye, as evidence of what had happened that night. During closing arguments, both sides retold Sasha's story and the facts, giving the jury their own interpretations. The prosecution believed that Sasha knew Martel was behind the door when she fired. The defense argued that Martel, thinking the police were at the door, quietly looked through the peephole, and Sasha didn't know he was there when she shot. The jury took only 2 hours to find Sasha guilty of murder. After the verdict, they deliberated for about 4.5 more hours before sentencing her to 55 years in prison. Interestingly, a week before the trial, Sasha had been offered a plea deal for 20 years but had turned it down. Now, with the longer sentence, she will be eligible for parole in 2048. Martell DeRouen is remembered as a loving family man, a decorated Air Force veteran, and a talented musician. That was the tragic case of Martell DeRouen and Sasha Skare. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.